Well, good afternoon and welcome to this week's update from the Calder Valley. Quite a lot's happened this week. We've seen this yesterday or the day before that the Prime Minister has announced a further easing of the lockdown. So from the 1st of June, we have car showrooms being able to be opened, and outdoor markets, which I know will be a great thing for a lot of people. And then further in a couple of weeks' time, on the 15th of June, we also have all other non-essential shops opening on the high street as well. The big proviso with all this stuff, of course, is that we practice social distancing, as we do when we go to the supermarket, whether it's Aldi, or Tesco's, Sainsbury's. We've seen some good principles in action down there. So providing people do the right thing and continue to social distance, the big thing is about keeping the R rate down. Then that should progress nicely. And I was at Tesco's this morning shopping for some of our elderly residents who are on lockdown. And it was good to see that the social distancing is still going very well down there. Parliament goes back to work, not virtually, but in person next week. We've got Parliament returning on the 2nd of June, so I'll be going down to London on Tuesday. Schools reopening next week, of course, as was announced last week. My office will also be returning back to the office next week from Monday. Again, Sophie's down there today trying to see whether we can put some social distancing measures in place. We'll probably still have to not have everybody in the office at the same time, but that's happening from next week as well. The other big news, of course, is the what's been happening with Dominic Cummings and my stance on that. But I dare say there'll be some questions as we go along, so I'll answer those. So on to questions that we've had in so far. Let me just have a look on here, if I can get this up, and then I can see what's coming in. Okay, so first question, let me just log back into here. First question comes from Anne, who asks, are we going to get a replacement bus service on Lower Edge Road after TJ Walsh went into liquidation? Sadly, they've gone into liquidation. We have many elderly residents who use the service regularly to go to Brighouse. We now have no means of getting into town. It is a long way to walk to the bypass, which is going to be closed for 8 weeks. To catch a bus to Halifax or Huddersfield, or walk into Elland for a bus to Brighouse. And like I said, that's from Anne. And the honest answer to your question is that I'm not sure. Though I'm sure if there is a public need, as I do know there is, the West Yorkshire Combined Authority will look into that service for us. But if you can drop me an email about specifics with your contact details to craig.whittaker.mp@parliament.uk, I can make some proper inquiries and come back to you on that specific issue. We've had lots of questions and lots of comments on the Dominic Cummings saga. Many of you will know that on the weekend, on Sunday, I tweeted out that I believe Dominic Cummings' position is untenable. The reason I believe that is because, look, I fully understand and respect the guy taking a decision to what he thought or what he thinks in his mind was the right thing to do for his family. So I fully respect that and I understand that. And had I been in the same position, I can honestly say that I would have probably considered it and may even take it. Who knows? I wasn't in that position and I didn't take that decision. He did though. And it is for that reason that I believe he needs to be held accountable and he needs to take responsibility for his actions. And nothing wrong with taking actions, but there is also always a consequence. And you cannot be the advisor to the Prime Minister of this country who has advised the nation to do one thing and then find a loophole to go and do whatever you want to do. And it is for that reason only that I believe his position is untenable. We saw the unprecedented press conference last night. Never before, I don't think, has an advisor had the privilege of holding a press conference on that scale. But that's what happened last night. And Dominic Cummings gave his version of events. And to be honest with you, I have no reason to disbelieve him at all. Of why he took the decisions and made the decisions and took the actions that he did. I don't know the guy. I've never formally met him. I've seen him around Parliament. I've been in a room with him, but I've never. I don't know the guy at all. So I've got no axe to grind whatsoever. So therefore, I come from the position that I take at face value what he said happened, and I have no reason not to believe him. But that still doesn't take it away from the fact that he is the Prime Minister's special advisor. He sits on SAGE, which is the scientific advisory group to the Prime Minister. He reports back from that group to the Prime Minister, who then advises the nation on what to do. The advice was very, very clear. It was stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. That was the message during the time that he went away from London, and that was the very clear message. Now, he says that he was sticking to the advice. I don't dispute that either. But why on earth would you not make that advice more public, more wider known than it was? When you are an MP, like I am, and like lots of my colleagues all over the country, when you've had emails from families that have been sat, man and wife, that have been married for many, many years, when they've been sat there in the lounge 1 minute and then one of them being taken away to hospital via ambulance the next, not being able to see them in hospital because of this pandemic, and then them passing away. That's the last time they see that family. I've had emails about not being able to go to the crematorium to say goodbye. Imagine how those people feel because they were following the scientific advice, the government advice, the advice that Dominic Cummings had, in fact, helped formulate the policy. We've had dozens and dozens of grandparents not being able to see grandchildren. We've seen people with who are vulnerable, who've been in lockdown. I said earlier, I've been out shopping this morning for some elderly residents of the Calder Valley, as I have been every week, because they're on lockdown. People that are doing the right thing, people that are adhering to the advice that has been given by the scientists, by the Prime Minister, and ultimately via Dominic Cummings. So you cannot give that advice and then go and do something different. The perception that this gives out is dire. So that is why, in my view, the position of Dominic Cummings is untenable. I don't blame him for taking the decisions that he did, rightly or wrongly. That's not for me to judge. The reality is he did take the decision, and he needs to take responsibility for that decision. And in my view, he either needs to resign or be released by the Prime Minister. So that's the Dominic Cummings saga. That's where I stand. I've seen nothing over the last 24 hours that changes my view. I've done very little press on it because I felt initially that my tweet explained my view to the letter. I've done another tweet today and Facebook message that says that my position hasn't changed, and I've done a little bit of media around that today. But that's with no axe to grind against Dominic. I just think the perception and the anger that is being felt by a lot of people who have sacrificed a lot of things, I think that I'm genuinely representing the view, my view as well, of the majority of my constituents. So that's the Dominic Cummings saga as we've seen it. The one final thing that I would say on there is that, look, I'm not getting into whether he, supposedly went on a test drive, whether his uncle died, whether it was his mother's birthday, all that stuff. They're all red herrings. The reality is the man took a decision, which I respect, but he also needs to take responsibility for the decision, and in my view, that position is untenable. All the other things are a distraction. I don't know whether it was his mother's birthday. I don't know whether his uncle died. I genuinely don't know. And one thing we do know is that that came out of the press statement yesterday was that a lot of the things that were in the press were actually untrue. But now he's cleared all that up. I still believe that he needs to take that responsibility for his decision. This one is from Hugh. Hugh says, I am still concerned that when my wife has to go back to work in retailing, I, as an over 70, will be put at risk. I can solve my problem by isolating alone at our static caravan. What is the government's problem with this solution? COVID, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, but it says, I think it's COVID beds take up seems to be around 30% capacity, so does not seem to be a problem at present. I can understand the government being concerned about people using, say, tents, as they will have to use site facilities for washing and toilets, etc. Static caravans are self-contained and no such problems exist. Well, the thing with this, I mean, there's a couple of points in here, Hugh, that I'll just pick up with you. You're absolutely right. The amount of people infected with COVID is reducing. The ICU beds are nowhere near capacity, which is a good thing, because that's exactly what the government's agenda has been trying to do. It's been trying to save the NHS, which seems to have coped incredibly well with this, and we do have lots of capacity in the system, which is a good thing. So you're absolutely right. The capacity in the hospital system seems to be reducing by the week. That, however, doesn't mean to say that we try and fill it back up by going and doing things that are going to put lots of people at risk. And we've had a few questions on the caravan, the static caravan scenario. The reality is that you are going from one area to the other. We mentioned last week on here about people using the Yorkshire and North East R rate figure being quite high at 0.8% compared to, say, London at I think at that point it was at 0.4 or whatever it was. But the reality is within Yorkshire and the North East, you have pockets that are higher and you have pockets that are lower. Calderdale just so happens to be quite a low infection rate. So if you are going from one area to another, even within the North East, even within Yorkshire, to your static caravan, what you're doing is you're embedding yourself in a different community, a community that may have a higher R rate or a lower R rate. So there is still a risk there, and until that risk comes down much lower than it currently is, that is why they are saying very clearly that second homes and caravans, which is a second home, are very much to be stayed clear of at this particular moment in time. So that's why you're still not allowed to go to caravan sites or campsites or anything or second homes, because you're interacting with different communities. The final point that I'll make, Hugh, on what you said is about your wife going back to work. Well, the key thing there is that whilst and as businesses open, it's incredibly important that lots of people are the businesses that you're going back into work at are putting social distancing measures in place so it's safe. I mentioned earlier, Sophie's even going down to our office, and it appears just at face value that we won't be able to get everybody back into the office at the same time. So we're doing a rota. So one would hope that your wife's employer is doing a risk assessment and looking at that very, very carefully. I go back to what I said before about hand wash, hand gels. Make sure you're using all those precautions you do when you go out shopping. When I go out shopping for the elderly, the first thing I do when I come back is I sanitize. I have a Clenel hand wipes, and I'm going to mention Clenel because it is all their products are developed here locally in the Calder Valley, but they've got a very high alcohol rate in them. I think it's over 60%. So just make sure that you're sanitizing, you are being as careful and as aware as you possibly can be under those circumstances. So I hope that answers your question, Hugh. We've got a question here from Darren. Darren asks, why are doctors being told to put COVID-19 on death certificates when it was not the cause? Well, Darren, I'm not aware that they are, but the information that I have is that it says that it depends on what kind of cause you're talking about. Medical professionals are legally obliged to not only note the direct cause of death based on their clinical judgment, but also the underlying cause of death, including any contributing causes in between the underlying and direct causes as well. It's therefore expected that if COVID-19 was diagnosed and or symptoms were present at the time of death, should test results not be available yet, that COVID-19 would be noted on the death certificate in one regard or another. So I hope that answers your question. So to sum up, basically the health professionals are legally obliged to not only note the direct cause of death based on their clinical judgment, but also the underlying cause of death, including any contributing causes. So that's why COVID, if suspected, would be listed on that death certificate as well. So I hope, Darren, that answers your question on that particular... The Chancellor has been interviewed saying that he doesn't believe that the self-employed scheme and furlough scheme are equal in terms of purpose, even though they are roughly equal in terms of outcome to the individual. It's by backing an extension of the self-employed scheme until October to align with extension on the furlough scheme. Just 2 points I'd make on that, Hannah. First of all, the furlough scheme was the first scheme to be announced, as you remember, several weeks ago. The Chancellor announced the scheme as the first scheme. And with all these schemes were announced very quickly, in a matter of days rather than the normal months. And basically, the furlough scheme had been implemented and was being paid out. The self-employment scheme was the second scheme that they announced some days later. And as we know from last week, you could start applying for the self-employed funds via the net. I suspect the Chancellor will make a statement on those, but they were keen not to do any amendments to anything in the middle of or just before they were due to give money out. The sole purpose was to get money to people. That's the stage we're currently in with the self-employed scheme. I can't tell you whether that's going to be extended like furlough, but what I can tell you is that you can now apply, and that money will be paid out this week, if not next week, if you haven't applied already. I dare say the Chancellor will make some more announcements around the schemes, as he does on a weekly basis. But because we're currently in the middle of that being paid out, I don't expect anything to be announced until they can see how well that went and how quickly they managed to get money to people. I think that just about covers all I know at this particular moment in time, but I am expecting a further announcement around that. The other thing that the only caution I would mention there is that on the furlough scheme, although it's been announced that it will be extended, we also know that by the end of this week, we will know from the Chancellor exactly what conditions are going to be applied to the extension. It's been widely reported in the press that people will be asked, people as in employers will be asked to pay more towards the scheme. We'll have to wait and see what the actual announcement is and what bearing that has on the self-employed, if any, if they make any further announcements. I've got another question here from David. What's the latest news in regards to the road repairs at Cromwell Bottom and Rastrick Bridge? And that's, as I said, from David. Well, I can tell you that Rastrick Bridge, because it's just down the road from where I live, the news this morning is that work will commence on that in a couple of weeks. They've been out and done a second inspection on that bridge. And they being the local authority, are telling me that those repairs will be complete by mid-July. On Ellenwood Bottom, Cromwell Bottom, with the road there, as we know, that was badly damaged in the flood, and in fact a lot of it was washed away. The council at the time very clearly said that it would be at least a year before that road was reopened. We're still waiting for the latest update on where they are with that. They were looking at options for the road. I'd heard it mentioned that they were talking about rerouting the road into the, it's not a cliff, but that hillside, but I haven't had an ultimate decision on what's going to happen. But as soon as I find out, I of course will let people know. Okay, I'm just conscious of time, but let me just have a look at some of the comments that have come in as we've been speaking. Just going back to the Dominic Cummings thing. Richard, and I know we've had some emails and comments in from Richard over the weekend about my decision to support Dominic Cummings to go. I gather Richard doesn't agree with my view, but he's said he will support his resignation if and when Stephen Kinnock and Tahir Ali resign. Usual Labour hypocrisy. They have no moral high ground here. Richard, this isn't a party political view at all. You know, Stephen Kinnock is not the special advisor to the Prime Minister. Tahir Ali also is an opposition backbench MP. Should they have their fingers wrapped? Probably. And I think, judging by the outcry that was in the press at the time, when they breached lockdown for whatever reason they did, they got the just reserves. But this guy is the special advisor to the Prime Minister. He sits on SAGE, which is our scientific advisory group that advises the Prime Minister on what is the scientific base around COVID and the medical advice around COVID. So this is a very, very different scenario to Stephen Kinnock and Tahir Ali, in my view. I think Stephen and Tahir probably got the fingers wrapped by their own party. This is a much bigger issue than those two. So that's all I'll say on that. Let me have a look. David, I think I've just answered your questions about Cromwell Bottom and Rastrick Bridge. I've answered that one too. Nick has asked, why don't we lock off regions with high R rates and unlock regions which have low R rates, with no one allowed in and no one allowed, and step by step we can start unlocking Britain, saving lives and let me see if I can expand that, and saving our economy. It's common sense. Allow people to travel wherever they want is not. I would agree, Nick, with that comment if we lived in somewhere like Australia or indeed the United States of America, where they have lots of landmass and lots of states. The United Kingdom is the second most populated piece of ground in Europe. We have a higher density than anywhere else. It would be very, very difficult. If you travel 200 miles from Sydney, you'll hit somewhere like Newcastle up in the north is about 100 miles north, and a place called Wollongong is about 80 miles south. You've got some big areas there. If you go 100 miles north of London, you hit Birmingham, having gone through two other very large conurbations of people as well. I'm not sure how feasible and how practicable that would be to implement. So, if you're suggesting here in Leeds we continue to lock down, we're down in London because they have a very low R rate now that they open up. I'm not sure how practicable that is, and I'm not sure how manageable and how you would police such a thing, particularly given our high density of people in the United Kingdom compared to those larger countries in landmass areas. Mark Learmont is asking, if shops are opening on the 1st and 15th of next month, why do we have to wait until July for a haircut? Well, as you'll see, luckily last time I had mine cut, it was fairly close to the wood, as my mother would have said. But no, desperately in need of a haircut. And if you've seen some of the reporters that I've spoken to over the last 24 hours via webcast, they're in the same boat. The reality is, look, the shops opening on the 1st are indeed open air markets or open markets. And car showrooms, so lots of space, lots of social distancing happening, and then all the rest of the shops are opening on the 15th of next month, which is 2 weeks away, almost just over 2 weeks. If you've seen the social distancing put in place already, when you go to Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, all those supermarkets, Aldi, whoever you go to, there are good social distancing measures, one-way systems around the stores. You're not allowed, there's tape across the floor every 2 meters so that people can shop at ease and in comfort. A haircut's a little bit different. I don't quite know how somebody could cut your hair by social distancing. So I suspect that's going to be a little bit like pubs, restaurants and all those types of businesses where there is much more social interaction and unable to social distance. So that's probably why you're going to have to wait for a haircut until July, at a guess. And that's providing everything goes well and the R rate stays low. Okay, let me just see if there's any more questions I haven't covered on here before we wrap it up. Let me just have a look. Hack is saying death certificates are being written by pathologists having verified the cause. I'm not aware of that, but if you want to send me an email, I'll definitely take that up with the NHS Trust locally on your behalf. The bridge repairs we've covered. Okay. Let me just check again. Sammy says betting shops closed within the leisure industry but could possibly open as retail on June the 15th. Should betting shops be regarded as retail or leisure? Well, basically, it's a bit like the announcement's already been made that they can open on June the 15th. Social distancing measures will have to be in place in those places as well. So yes, the 15th of June for those two semi. Okay, I think I've made that point. CJ Eden. Richard has come back and said we agree to disagree then. Yeah, we do, Richard. Clearly. Let's have a look. Hack's come back. He's replying to somebody else, so I won't get involved in that because I haven't seen the initial one. Thanks, Mark, for your comment. I don't agree with you, but thank you. David Skipmore's saying, what's your government doing about illegal immigration across the channel? Well, this has been a problem for several years, as we know, with people coming across on boats. We have international obligations to make sure that we are processing them once they hit the English coast. So that's important. But as we've seen, Priti Patel has said that she's looking at other measures with the French government, because that's obviously where they're coming from. They're coming across from the French coast to see what they can do more to stop that happening. Hack. Do I think that Boris and the government are in danger of being irreparably damaged? No, ironically, no, I don't. I think I don't agree with the decision that's been taken. I kind of have a bit of a feeling that Boris is perhaps gone beyond the call of duty for sticking up for one of his staff members. He believes him, and as an employer, that's his role. Would I have taken the same decision? Listen, I'd stick up for each one of my team. In fact, I'd die for each one of my team. They're that valuable to me personally. So from that respect, I do understand it. I do respect it. But I think I think the problem here is that they're not grasping it's almost like the Cummings episode is almost like the straw that broke the camel's back. Lots of people have given up huge sacrifices over the last 2 or so months via lockdown, and we've covered off some of those. We've covered off some of those scenarios that people have had to deal with. Families not being able to say goodbye to people at crematoriums because they're not allowed in the crematoriums, not allowed to go to see those that are sick in hospital because obviously of COVID. And so there's those type of things. Grandparents not seeing grandchildren, elderly people that are self-isolating, that are, there's a lot of mental health issues, there's a lot of issues around loneliness for some of the elderly people as well. So lots of people have done the right thing, but let me just make it very, very clear. The British public aren't stupid. They're not stupid. Lots of people have been saying, well, I'm going to go off and see my grandkids. Well, that isn't the right thing to do. The reason the scientists and the medical advisors have advised people to stay at home is to stop the spread of the disease. So why on earth, because somebody else has, in my view, and I've already made this point very clear, done the wrong thing, that doesn't mean to say that everybody else has to go and risk your life or risk the life of your grandchildren or other people or those that are vulnerable either. That just does not make sense. The British people, the people in Yorkshire anyway, are not that silly to think, well, oh, sorry, I'm going off, I'm going to have a party, I'm going to go and do that kind of thing. So from that regard, I don't think it's undermined the health message. Because the majority of people, as I've seen this morning, as I'll see tomorrow when I'm going out again shopping for other people in the community, we will see people social distancing, not because they like doing it, because it's the right thing to do to protect health, protect themselves, protect others around them, and most importantly to protect the families. So from that part of it, I don't think the fundamental public health message has been undermined. Do I think Boris and government are in danger of being irreparably damaged? No, I don't. Not at all. I've already said it's a decision I don't agree with, but will it do it damage in the long term? No. The great British public will move on at some point in the future, and there'll be something else that we'll be talking about. Thanks, Hugh, for that. Amanda Hope, did I get your question? Obviously I didn't, otherwise I'd been mentioning it, that we can agree on. Okay, I think... Andy Hudson, bit concerned about Nigel Farage's assertion that the French Navy are directing illegals into UK waters. Andy, stop reading the Daily Mail. What a load of absolute nonsense. It is the French government's responsibility, as it is the British Navy's responsibility, that if any of those small boats that are loaded up with people go into the water, they have to rescue them. So are they going to shadow those small boats? Of course they are. That's exactly what they're doing. They're not towing them across. I've heard all different types of things being said that they're escorting them across. That's not what they're doing. They're shadowing them to make sure they don't get into trouble. Can the French do more to stop these illegal immigrants coming from the French coast to the English coast? Yes, of course they can. But this is just pure nonsense that they're being escorted across by the French Navy. The French Navy, like the British Navy, they are out in the Channel and they are making sure that these immigrants don't drown. That's basically what they're doing. Roger Drayden says, I'm concerned that with only 5% of the population with positive antibody tests, we are primed for a second wave. Well, it's always a risk, Roger, when you come out of lockdown. The more people go against doing things like social distancing. We've been very protected in our homes by lockdown. Of course, as the population start to integrate more on whatever level, there is a risk that may happen. And that's why we need to make sure that we're doing all the things that we can possible. We need to stay aware. We need to make sure that we are not hugging people, not shaking people's hands. We are social distancing. When we're shopping, we're doing it properly. When we're going out walking, when we're going out doing exercise on a daily basis, we do that in a social distancing, responsible manner. And I'm convinced that if we continue to do those things for some time longer, we will reduce the risk of a second wave coming through. Thank you. Thanks, Julie, for that. These are all comments on Dominic Cummings. Pauline says it's time that we should drop this and gave the man some peace. Yeah, you're right. Well, I think it will die a natural death. What I don't agree with, Pauline, is the harassment his family have had to endure. That's always the negative side of anybody in the public eye, is that, we saw the Advan outside his home yesterday. We saw people rent a crowd out there shouting for him to go. If you turn on the TV, the guy is working at number 10. The only people in his home is his wife and child. And that isn't fair that they have to endure that level of abuse because of something the husband does. And, it's not fair on the neighbours either. So why the hell are these idiots doing that type of thing is beyond me. People do have a view on this. People are making the views known. And to harass the guy and his family in the home, in my view, is a step too far. Okay, I think we've been going now for some time, so I think we'll call that quits for today. I don't think I've missed any of the questions. Let me just have a quick look to see whether Amanda mentioned that I had missed her question, and I just can't see it on my list here, Amanda. So if you want to email us in for next week, although I'm back in Parliament next week, I will do the same webcast. So send your questions into the office, or indeed as we do the live chat, send your questions in as you are doing anyway. So thanks very much. Stay safe, keep social distancing, and as the lockdown eases next week, enjoy the newfound freedoms, but let's all do it in a socially responsible manner, so that you're protecting yourself, you're protecting the people around you, and more importantly, you're protecting your families as well. Thanks very much. Have a great week.